Hello Earth 616 and welcome to episode 1 part 2. If you haven't already gone and listened to episode 1 part 1, I would recommend doing that before going ahead and listening to this one, just so you're up to speed. I'd like to once again thank special guest Earth Dragon for joining me in discussing some of the most underused hero and aspect combinations in Marvel Champions and how to approach building them for success in the Rise of Red Skull campaign. Just a quick side note, this should be the last episode with the echoey audio issues that we're experiencing. I'd like to apologise for the poor quality audio on my end, and I hope that it hasn't affected anyone's listening experience too much. Also, the podcast should make its way to Apple's podcast platform very, very shortly. I apologise that this has taken some time. We're just resolving an issue on the back end with Podbean. This second part is actually over an hour long, so I'm going to skip the intro music and just jump straight into it. Thanks for listening. So Captain Marvel Protection is next up on the list, and I mean, immediately just saying that Captain Marvel Protection, it does feel like a deck that is infinitely less obvious than some of her other pairings. I haven't actually gotten around to giving this a go yet. So I haven't gone through the motions of trying to suss out how I wanted to play in this aspect, what I wanted to do, or whether it's just having her lead into her hero set. How did you approach building Captain Marvel Protection for this scenario?
Okay, so the first thing you notice if you're playing anyone who loves energy symbols, whether it's Thor, Iron Man, or Captain Marvel, and you start looking at protection, you start noticing that there's a lot of energy symbols in protection. So whether it's Nova, obviously, because he likes the energy symbols too, desperate defense, preemptive strike, med team, defensive stance, electrostatic armor, energy barrier, indomitable. Both the blocking strategy protection builds have a lot of energy symbols, and I guess they sometimes call it defenseless, but I think it's just blockless is probably a better title for it. Protection strategies have lots of energy symbols, so you're good there, and it's really easy to incorporate those things. So I'm always a setup type guy. I prefer to be able to play things early that might not be useful immediately, but when the board or I get different upgrades out later, I can then use them. So I went with Indomitable, Energy Barrier, Med Team, and Preemptive Strike as my big guys, right? In fact, those are the only 3 or 4 cards I used other than the power-ups in a pair of allies from the protection set. So Indomitable, that would be able to get played, and you can play multiple of those, right? So if you're cleaning up a turn, you can throw an Indomitable out, like it goes out, sits on the table, and then especially when you shuffle, if they're all out there, then you don't have to worry about it. But people kind of sleep on the fact that they see that she has 1 defense, and you'll really hone in on that and be like, man, she only has 1 defense, she can't block. So in Indomitable, what that does is when you defend, you discard Indomitable, and then you get to ready your hero again. So if you only have 1 defense, it's not that useful a card. Well, if you have Captain Marvel's helmet out, she gets +1 defense, and if she has the aerial trait, which she gets if she has Cosmic Flight out, which she has 2, you get +2 defense. And so her defense, by the time you get to the deck the first time, is going to be up to 3. And that's where you can start to scrape off a lot of damage, and get those out and use them if you can. The energy barriers, those are great for redirecting damage. Captain Marvel personally has the hero side rechannel. So you're able to take a energy resource, spend 1 to heal a damage, and then draw a card. So she almost wants to have a little bit of floating damage. The med teams, honestly, I don't even think I use those on her much. They're more to keep her allies in play. The allies I threw in there was Brother Voodoo, who you almost want to re-up and get back in there and recycle. Nova. Nova's a great one because the way he works, he has an interruptibility where when an enemy initiates an attack against you, spend an energy resource and deal 2 damage to that enemy. So he can actually finish off a lot of minions but before they even land their blow. And then War Machine. And if anyone knows anything about this, is a very, very flavorful card because Carol Danvers and James Rhodes were I don't remember how that ended, but I know they were going out with each other for a long time. They're both Air Force officers, right? So they had a lot of background history. So I had to kind of throw a War Machine in here, and that was let me slot some Earth's Mightiest Heroes because at that point she had a few different Avengers in there and made that useful to be able to get. A lot of times it'd be Brother Voodoo kind of feeding one of the two thwart to attack people another play, if not Captain Marvel herself, usually Captain Marvel herself. But yeah, you end up being able to mitigate a lot of damage that way. And with all those cards being energy symbols, once you get your what's the name of the card? Energy channel. There we go. Get the energy channels out there. It's just real easy to juice them up because you need to spend that energy to build that up. And then once you have the 5 energy counters on there, you can discard it and do 10 damage to something. So yeah, it's a real viable build. I think protection is maybe not her best build, but it's got to be up there. It's got to be up there. She's got a lot of synergy with it, both from the energy symbols and just the fact that she can actually pull off some decent blocks. And there's tons of different ways to go. You know, like I said, I didn't put Desperate Defense in there, but that's a big one you can put in there. Instead, I decided to go with Preemptive Strike and Indomitable, which I think combo with each other quite well because the Indomitable pretty much scrapes off with that 3 defense, whatever the villain's doing directly, and then Preemptive Strike gets rid of all the boost icons and then throws it back in the villain's face. So you end up getting quite a bit of a damage swing. And then of course the energy barrier, in case there was a second boost card or some attachments on there, gets rid of those straight away. So it's it's a layer. I like layered defenses, so she can layer the defense and it's still highly offensive.
Yeah, I really like that. And yeah, that was the one thing I did mention. The first thing that did pop into my mind when I began kind of considering Captain Marvel protection, although as I said I haven't built it yet, just that there was a number of lightning bolt energy icons appearing throughout protection as a whole aspect. So yeah, I'm actually really excited to give this one a try. I think that'll be interesting, and I like that you've mentioned that things like Indomitable and stuff like that can sit on the board make energy channel better because it thins out the deck and allows you to see that more often and see the lightning bolts relevant to it more often. But you've also got that kind of almost coincidental synergy with Cosmic Flight and the helmet. So yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting one. We're going to move on to Doctor Strange in Aggression.
Okay.
My first question regarding that was, for instance, some aspects kind of, well, I guess Doctor Strange generally, with some builds you want your aspects and basic cards to essentially just get out of the way and let you do invocation things. So how well did you feel that Aggression plays with Doctor Strange's tool set? Does it add enough, or was it really not one of those things where it was trying to get out of the way?
So there's, I think one of the, if we're being objective, maybe the mistake that was made with Doctor Strange, now that we have a deeper card pool, wasn't necessarily anything on his kit, but the fact they gave him the Avenger trait. So if you end up playing Doctor Strange with the Avenger heavy aspects, leadership or aggression, which I was playing. Earth's Mightiest Heroes makes Doctor Strange go nuts, because he's able just to constantly ready up with the plethora of Avengers sitting on the table. He's able to use Avengers Tower to just keep them coming and keep them, just like I said, just a lot of them out there. Doctor Strange's really only weakness, because he's kind of the antithesis of Cap, right? Where Cap has a real nasty Shadows of the Past and Obligation combo that brings him back down. Doctor Strange doesn't have that. A lot of the stuff nearly doesn't affect him, because his obligation can just sit on the table and it doesn't affect the invocations. And so if you got a deck like this one, which utilizes Earth's Mightiest Heroes to just keep him cast as many invocations in a turn as he can, you're good to go, right? Yeah, he just go off the handle. But his one downside is he sometimes suffers a little bit from minion control, because he doesn't have a lot of like AoEs. A lot of it's more focused on just big blasts. Because so he has the one invocation, Crimson Bands of Sidorak, that is a 7 damage and a stun, and then he has Magic Blast in his deck. I think he's got 2-3 copies of that. Two copies of that. And so he just has like these big blasts, but he can't take out the scrubs. So if you've got a bunch of allies out that can just dogpile on the scrubs, and then guys like Tigra can stay out for a while. Of course, She-Hulk can build up her damage up. Sentry, Valkyrie blasts minions as they're coming. A lot of people say Doctor Strange leadership is the way to go. I think now that there's a plethora of Avenger allies, I think aggression now tops leadership for Doctor Strange's best aspect.
Yeah, that's been the consensus Achilles heel for Doctor Strange, that he doesn't deal well with a spread of minions, and that's something that, whereas if you're playing solo, Cap can do okay in that scenario. So yeah, mitigating the how much he gets overwhelmed by a lot of early minion pressure is definitely a big part of making Doctor Strange successful.
And you've got melee in aggression, right? So I put all the stuff in that was going to help him just get through any of the minions. So 3 melees, 3 relentless assaults, 3 press the advantages. I also had Spider Girl in there, so she'd come and stun, confuse, and then finish him off with the press the advantage. I mean that's basically the supplement that I had, was the allies with Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and then just trying to clean up minions, and that's really all you need. And again, I apologize that I'll make sure next time I'm tracking my exact record with all these guys, but I don't believe I lost with Doctor Strange. But there's always those fringe losses of guys getting advances early. I know that happened to me a couple times, where one time in particular, both the first and second turn advance went off. So it's like, well, that's a lost game. But but it's outside of some of those real fringe cases, like both Doctor Strange aggression and Cap aggression are I think probably the best, cleanest ways to approach solo right now.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed is that melee, off the top of my head, is it a physical or a mental?
It's a mental.
That's what I thought, because and that's the thing that occurred to me, that Magic Blast will get you a confuse on an enemy if you hit the mental. So being able to run a couple of melees and kind of giving yourself that chance to hit the confuse can obviously be very helpful versus minion swarms if they've kind of put a few attacks on you, being able to kind of go into Stephen Strange mode and clean up the damage a bit. Yeah, I was fairly sure off the top of my head that melee was a mental, but then it made me think that thematically you'd think it would be a physical.
Well, the only other thing that jams Doctor Strange up sometimes is if there's no status cards on the field All right, he's got the one invocation. It's the name is slipping my mind. Forgive me. That changes a status card to some other status card, right? And so occasionally you don't have one anywhere to go off of for whatever reason, and so that can sit there on top of the deck. And if Wong's not out, um, so that's the other thing. Like you said, if you've got plenty of mental and physical symbols within the deck, Magic Blast is another way to try to get one of those out there, and then you can just switch it to whichever the other one is, just to get through your invocation deck, because that's really what it is, and that's what again, other than the Avengers trait that I noted earlier and giving him all the perks of being an Avenger. Yeah, other than being getting all the perks of being an Avenger, the invocation deck is kind of that overtuned part that somehow got through play testing, and the guys are probably just having so much fun with it they weren't paying attention to how powerful it was. But yeah, he's far and away, in particular in multiplayer. Doctor Strange is far and away the best character, and hopefully it stays that way. Just because I wouldn't want to see runaway power levels. I think he's a little more than what they needed to go, and that's fair enough. It happens, but it's like it's kind of the barometer of like, are they weaker than Doctor Strange? And if not, maybe we shouldn't release this deck.
Something that gets my goat a little bit is seeing people complain about the differing power levels of heroes. I think that one of the beautiful things about using the Marvel license is that it's not only possible for them, but super flavorful for them to produce heroes of differing power levels. It's good to see that we're going to get heroes like Hawkeye and Black Widow who aren't doing stupid over the top things, but then again aren't having to deal with extra otherworldly threats. Whereas Doctor Strange,
Sure.
given him being like the commander in chief of the magical forces of planet Earth, kind of he should be powerful. And Captain America, likewise, being essentially 1 in a million survivor of the super soldier serum experiments, and kind of one of the first superheroes should be doing stuff, because he's obviously jumped into taking on space
Sure.
aliens and jumped onto thwarting drug cartels, and he's just powerful in any kind of situation you throw him in. And it's going to be great to see that you've got heroes that aren't ever taking on such bigger threats and don't need to be that powerful. Having that street level heroes on one power level, and having your more kind of cosmic multiversal heroes on another, and being able to work with them on differing power levels, and players being able to appreciate that they do have different power levels, but trying to make them work well anyway, I think is really a big draw of the game. And
yeah,
stop complaining about it.
I definitely understand that angle. I think the valid concern is like, where do you put scenario levels, right? That's where it's hard to place them, and it kind of mucks up the conversation when people say the game's too easy, or or is too hard, right? It's like, oh, okay, so where it, like, there has to be context to the discussion at that stage. Like, are you playing with Doctor Strange and Cap on two-handed and going through the game that way? Because yes, that would make the game a little bit easier than if you were going with like you mentioned, Hawkeye and Black Widow. We're gonna have a little bit tougher time if that's the two that you went with. So so people just need to make sure that they keep that context in there. And I think the other thing that people took were taken aback was, I think if there's one guy that people wanted to see just busted level strong, it was Thor. And unfortunately, I don't think he quite finished baking the oven in some regards. But he's getting there. I think some cards have been coming down the line that Thor stock is definitely increasing.
Yeah, I think Hulk was also a victim of that as well. I mean, Hulk does does do some pretty messed up stuff, but the problem is that it's very linear. He only does his Hulk and he smashes, and that's all he does. And sometimes you just get the encounter deck hands you a random roadblock that you're just not adequately. You're doing all your smashing on this tiny roadblock, and it's just stopping the smashing from being more effective in winning the game. So he's very prone to little obstacles, kind of disrailing the game.
Not to get too off subject, but the one thing that anyone listening can perhaps look forward to, because I think the three heroes that are at this stage regarded as the bottom three, and I don't necessarily agree with this, and in particular with Thor's case, is Hulk, She-Hulk, and Thor. Those three have traits that nobody else has. So Thor has the Asgard trait, and Hulk and She-Hulk have the Gamma traits. That's where they could come out with a card that's only usable by Gamma heroes that really pushes them to a different spot, right? That synergizes with them, whether it's within the individual aspects or whether it's like kind of like the Sorcerer Supreme, which is another big reason why Doctor Strange is like, what? Because he gets a 6 hand size on top of the invocation deck, so he's just got resources coming out of his rear end, right? And it is, and that's I feel is the fairest criticism levied against him, as for, like why does he have so many resources at his disposal and these other guys don't? And that's where you could see those things get fixed and not throw the game out of balance if you approach it from that angle. So hopefully we do see some Gamma synergistic cards that really boost Hulk and She-Hulk, and we see that Asgard card that comes out that really makes your Asgard heroes up there towards that same level, because then you could really take the scenarios out to the next level. Because I think most of us are hoping that by the time we get to things like Apocalypse or Thanos, that the first couple of times we play them, our jaws drop and we just say, what just happened? Because we just lost in 4 turns and are not sure what we just saw, but yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where the game goes. But for right now, yeah, it's Doctor Strange is on the overtuned side for what the scenarios are throwing out.
The beautiful thing about this game, with that because it is a living card game and is cooperative by nature rather than competitive, they can err on the side of things being more powerful rather than underpowered in regards to the play experience, because they have got, I think there's now like a rookie mode, which is even simpler than standard. And then there's all the way up to, heroic 1 through Floppity Jillion. So you can always kind of, with each character, you can actually
scale
the game's difficulty to the point where you find that it's
definitely
challenge
definitely.
You, so,
and we're starting with the Kree Fanatic and the Anachronaut modules, and I think most of us are on the same page that we'd like to see Heroic kind of get phased out and then do more with the modules and be like, this is how you make the game harder, right? So we're not kind of relying on a pseudo mode to do it, but more of a permanent fix than the Band-Aid, which is hey, if they wanted to appease some people, and I'm glad that kind of appeased some folks. But yeah, just for anyone listening out there, do Red Skull, and if you get the Kang pack, throw Master Time and the Anachronauts in the Red Skull deck. And I don't know how much Heroic 2 is viable at that stage.
Yeah, the heroic modes is a really, really good worst case scenario, to be honest. And I think that the other side effect of having heroic is that it provides a different deck building mentality and a different deck building experience to building for solo or multiplayer, because you've got your deck building choices change again because of the speed of it and how quickly you're having to deal with new threats. So, but yeah, it's good to hear that Doctor Strange and aggression in general is actually up there with some of the best aspect combinations with two of the most powerful heroes.
aggression was probably the worst aspect. I, I just I think before the Hulk pack, I would say it was the worst aspect, and I think after the Hulk pack and after the Rise of the Red Skull, right, just that little bit of infusion of the cards from there with the drop kick and press the advantage and some of these Spider Girl Sentry, getting that nice bevy of allies. I think it's pushed to the top, at least in the solo game. Leadership probably edges it out, but we'll see how that shakes out when Ant-Man and Wasp come out, because I think both of them are going to get some interesting decks coming out of those.
Yeah, aggression is definitely my worst aspect, and I'm keen to try some of these different ideas that we've mentioned in the couple of aggression decks we've discussed so far. And also obviously there's one card at least I can think of coming in future that I'm not going to spoil, that will definitely help the aggression decks, especially those running some allies. So yeah, your results were pretty good with Doctor Strange aggression, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I don't recall losing with Mike. I didn't write it down, but I know there was just a couple of those fringe losses that could have happened to anybody, so it wouldn't have mattered who I was playing. But I don't think those happen with Captain America or Doctor Strange.
Yeah, those fringe losses are usually just happening where you haven't got that treachery cancel, which happens.
Well, sorry for cutting you off. That's a good note, though, is that Doctor Strange does actually have treachery cancel, so he actually can mitigate some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's so you're less likely to fall to them, but you've got to have them at the right time. And I actually also play the Lord of the Rings card game, and anything that kind of cancels a treachery or a villain of the counter deck effects is pretty golden. So yeah, we're going to move on to Hawkeye protection, which I was immediately pretty chuffed on. My limited experience with Hawkeye so far has been the arrow plan is the best plan, and to me, it just, when I was approaching this, I built it and approached building it with just looking to help him out as far as his lower HP, and just put kind of protection good stuff in, but just generally not divert the game plan too far from firing arrows. How did you attack Hawkeye in the protection aspect?
So a quick sub note here is I actually kind of built all these guys in a 4 sequence. And the reason why I did that was just to kind of keep multiplayer in the back of my mind, even though I was playing all these guys solo, because I ended up playing some two-handed with them as I was breaking one deck apart and build another one. Like I would always have 2 built at a time. So like the one-ofs that you can only have 1 out at a time, I'm in a sequence of 4, right? So Black Panther, Black Widow, Captain America, Captain Marvel, you'd only see 1 Quinn carrier in that whole group. War Machine only got used once. And the interesting thing is War Machine made it into both of the protection decks, because that's the aspect that has the roughest time thwarting. So and fair enough, because you stay in hero mode the longest. So it's I ended up putting him in there again, because he can get 6 or 8 thwart off of there, for the cost in a protection deck is huge. It's fantastic. And I also because you get the upgrades during the campaign, right? One big thing to keep in mind is it's not always the best move to grab the and that's stuff I'm going to write down next time too, is I'll mention which upgrade I took. It's not always the best move to grab the one that you would think you should grab, right? So for Cap, I had mentioned that I grabbed recovery. I didn't grab the attack one. I wanted the bigger pool of hit points so I could use the counter attacks. I wanted that better recovery. I wanted to be able to roll into Red Skull and be able to draw an extra card, which then I would be able to, even after you go in a Red Skull, right? Even if all I did with Cap was use the extra card to ready myself up and do something else, it it avoided me taking an obligation, right, from the expert campaign. So it's sometimes you want to fill in your holes. So with Hawkeye, I ended up taking the thwart to give him a 2 thwart. and that way he was able just to kind of cruise through those last scenarios as I thought he might be able to do. This was my only other loss on Absorbing Man was with Hawkeye, and there is a few like tricky treacheries that Absorbing Man can throw out there that can kind of blast through you. Namely, like he has the stuns and depending on what environment is in play, those boost cards can really come into effect. So it's so he is a little bit of a mixed bag there, where it's really easy to get comfortable fighting Absorbing Man. But in general, with a Hawkeye, like you said, arrow strategy, and I apologize, I know I'm rambling a little bit, is get those allies out there. Protection, I think right now, even though it doesn't have a big cache of allies, it probably has the best cache of allies. Between Brother Voodoo, Iron Fist being able to stun twice off the same ally, Luke Cage coming out with a tough token, Clea that can get shuffled back in your deck and just get re-racked as another chump blocker. It does have a very good, very consistent collection of allies in protection. So I think the way to go is just to get some energy barriers and some protective or preemptive strikes to kind of mitigate any incoming damage to Hawkeye in particular, and then the rest of it. I did have a couple of momentum shifts in his deck too.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, momentum shift was one I was going to mention. I really liked the momentum shift, just being able to help the arrows hit the numbers, but also just that incidental healing.
Yeah, because and that also lets it to where like the indirect damage, you can take a few of those points yourself, and then just throw it right back at the villain. But yeah, med teams, make sure you get a couple med teams, and just keep those allies out there. Hawkeye also kind of has a self-sufficient bow once you get going, because he has the two expert marksmen, right? So he can find an arrow, put it in the quiver, and be able to use it with the expert marksmen without touching anything else in your hand. So now your hand is your hand to play whatever you want. So even though it on the surface it seems like is he going to be able to get one of these allies out? Yeah, he almost always can play an ally a turn, because once that quiver and those expert marksmen get out there, they're working on their own system, their own thing, and they end up thinning the arrows out of the deck to where half the time you don't draw one anyways. And you do shuffle now for those of you that missed that ruling, that anytime you search your deck or search effect always causes a shuffle.
Oh, really? I hadn't seen that. I thought I've been playing it as written, and what I would do is once I use the quiver, I'd actually just turn the cards revealed face up so I could see them on the top of the library. Though obviously I was usually just drawing back into them at the end of that turn anyway. But.
Yeah, no, that's because that's the way it was originally explained when they reviewed Rise of Red Skull from FFG, but they I think they kind of wrapped their heads around it wrong, and then shared it wrong, and then they went back and rediscussed it and was like, nah, I think we actually discussed that search meant you always shuffle. So hopefully they clean up that confusion. But outside of aggression, because I know that's how people were using it, right, where you could see what that top resource was, it's actually better to shuffle, because then you do get more arrows to come up the next turn, and so you can get the double arrow. So with War Machine, Mockingbird, and Brother Voodoo all in there, and the fact that a lot of his allies are going to stick on the table, you throw a couple of Earth's Mightiest Heroes in there. You can fire whatever arrows you got. Helicarrier, Avengers Mansion, some of the old standards actually work really good with Hawkeye. And if you can, he's a real good option if the threat's staying under control, just to hang out and don't use his bow search. If you can play all your stuff cleanly, to don't bother search for his bow. Take that first turn, throw everything out, spend one more turn in alter ego mode, and then search for his bow, and then go at it. But if you've got some leeway and take one turn to set up, take a turn to set up. I think that's pretty crucial with Hawkeye is to take that setup turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the finding out about that ruling has changed my perspective. I had heard that there was talk about it, and they kind of admitted that they stuffed up there, but I wasn't sure that they'd intended it or have errated it. But it kind of feels flavorful.
Outside of aggression is a good thing. Outside of aggression is a good thing. So I wouldn't sweat it too much.
It kind of feels flavorful, though, the idea of him like looking in his room on the Queen Carrier and kind of going into his room and like, where did I leave the bomb arrow and where did I leave the boxing glove arrow, and just kind of seeing all the different arrows or seeing all this different stuff in his room and finding the thing he needs, but knowing that obviously, that's where I'm leaving that here kind of thing. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. And obviously, as you mentioned, having that ability to quiver again the next turn and knowing that you may be potentially coming into a new crop of arrows. How did you rate this deck overall, and how are you finding Hawkeye in the context of the hero packs we've had released so far?
So Hawkeye, if I'm being fair and objective, is probably a little below average. But I don't think a lot of people mind because he's fun. And with solo mode, you definitely have to use a lot of those kind of cheap solo tactics that exist in the game right now that will probably eventually be vetted. Because I think at this point, they're probably getting some play testers in there that have played the game and have kind of seen what some of the what's holding it back from kind of being that optimal level of challenge that a lot of us are looking for, where we get to the end of the game and we barely lost but felt like we could have won, or we barely won and felt like we could have lost. Like a lot of when you think of expert mode, that's what a lot of guys are looking for. So I think it maybe not next year, but after that, now that you've got those play testers in there that are going to be like, you really need some ally mitigation, or something. You know what I'm saying? I think we just have a more experienced group that can give feedback now. And that's the way all games go. That's just the way they. Sometimes it takes a bit to get that more refined opinion, right? From actual experience. So right now the chump blocking works just fine in getting guys out there. But even then, with Luke Cage and the War Machine combo, and especially with War Machine with Earth's Mightiest Heroes, it's really easy to get them out there and just kind of save their toughs until you needed it. Iron Fist, right, going out there and stunning. So he did rather well. As far as the campaign goes, I was impressed. The other note about the campaign, though, is it's pretty typical that you do end up beating Zola and Red Skull without a loss, even though those are individually the two toughest scenarios. Because by the time you roll into them, you just have so much stuff you're going into those scenarios with. So you've got 2, 3, 4 extra allies. I took with Hawkeye, I took the energy cannon, and then when there was a couple of minions on the table during Zola, just blasted through them, and just cleaned up the table real quick and was able to win the game there. And then just having that. That, like I said, I took the bonus thwart and was able to clear a side scheme and draw cards. So that's the one kind of funny thing about once you get past Taskmaster, the chances for a loss, I think, actually go down, even though those are the harder scenarios.
Yeah, and I think personally, I mean, I haven't played Hawkeye in a lot of aspects. In fact, I think I've only played in protection apart from playing the pre-constructed deck out of the box. I kind of feel like this may end up being Hawkeye's best aspect or close enough to it. I think the energy barriers helps with his low HP and just having the quiver finding the stun arrows and then having tackle on top of that, you can kind of play that stun lock game, except you've got this card that's actually searching. So you're seeing 10 cards a turn to go look for one of your 5 odd stun outs. So I think that this may be Hawkeye's best aspect combination. Do you think there's anything better as far as aspects for Hawkeye?
For solo, maybe not. I mean, and it is kind of that fringe thing, like you said. But then when you start to look at it, and I didn't go with tackles because, like I said, I think Iron Fist and the tough blockers had that covered. And then instead, I went with the energy barriers. Of course, the Night Nurse took off any sting off of stuns and confuses on me personally, and then preemptive strikes and momentum shifts. So I kind of used that, like, if I was going to take a hit to my advantage and turn that into damage. But I think he does have the tools, and protection has those cards that if you have quite a bit of inherent damage in your kit and ways to stun and confuse in your kit, which he does. The big one is confusion. The big one is to be able to confuse so that when you need to roll down, you've got the oh crap handles, that you can grab onto. And then Mockingbird is arguably the best signature ally at this stage. Just being able to scrape all damage off and then come back. And so if you've got like the Helicarrier and Avengers Mansion in there, it's really easy to get her back down. No sweat. So yeah, he's got the means to just stay in there and plug away. I don't know if I'd say this is his best aspect multiplayer, because generally a protection build, once you push more players, one, stuns and confuses aren't quite as valuable because they end up getting an attack off anyways, right? So I'd probably think Justice is probably his best aspect multiplayer, just so he can keep control of the board. I think that's where he would really excel with those Justice board control cards. But you could very well be right that the protection is going to end up sliding into to being his best build solo.
I would almost agree with you in regards to Mockingbird's status as one of the better signature heroes. But for me, it's actually ends up being down in War Machine territory, just because it stops you using the basic blocking bird. I think, like, I've heard people talking about like leaving the signature Mockingbird in the Hydra prison, just so they can replace her with the basic blocking bird instead. And yeah, obviously Hawkeye.
You're saying you've heard a lot of people say they don't like her?
Like, for me, I don't like her because it doesn't allow me to play. Doesn't play nicely with the blocking bird, the basic blocking bird ally.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think where she is good though, because you already have the electric arrows, right, in the kit. You can't sleep on that 2 thwart. The fact that you have someone that kind of fills that's where when you see a signature ally that either really synergizes with you or fills a hole, I think the fact that she can thwart plus absorb all the damage is a real good a good spot for her. But it's fair enough. I mean, your blocking bird, as your lovingly call her, is one of the better just raw allies in the game. I mean, three for a stun plus a couple thwart / damage and then another block. before she goes out is pretty good. I mentioned this earlier. I think eventually those are going to get mitigated, but they're not yet. So it is what it is. Those cheap cheese tactics are going to get used because they can be, and if they're available, you should.
Yeah, basic blocking bird is overkill in this deck. I think it's just that I've got a love relationship with basic blocking bird. It's probably my favorite card just because of the cheesy nickname, and it's obviously amazing solo, which is all I've played so far. So, but yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on Hawkeye protection going forward because I think.
Did you say that you've only played solo so far?
I've only had solo games, just not so much the pandemic, just the player base in WA doesn't seem to be, well, I haven't been able to make contact with anyone that has yet had the opportunity to play multiplayer with me. So
yeah, fair enough.
Looking to try and make time and just force myself to work out Tabletop Simulator or Octagon and give it a try. I think with Kang coming out, I'll have to start building for two-handed solo games just to get the full experience of the time stream separation. So
yeah, the game definitely starts taking on a new face, and I know some guys feel like the game gets bogged down a little bit when you push past 2. At the same time, I think most of the guys who have experience there can tell you that as long as everyone's played the game and they all know how the game flows individually, 3 players is definitely not that much of a hassle, and that's where the game really starts to sing, because you don't have those stun lock options. Like you really have to start thinking, what are you going to do? You have to start calling for actions from other people. Hey, I see you have an Avengers Mansion down. Are you going to need that card? I could really use it. So it kind of helps everyone fill in their turns. That's when you can start to see some of these aspects that look a little weaker in some regards, really shine in those bigger venues. But for most heroes, because they're mostly Avengers, right? I think in the solo gameplay, the bulk of them are going to do best with either leadership or aggression, just because there's a lot of synergies there. With the Avengers Tower and Earth Mightiest Heroes, right? There's just a lot of ally synergy within the Avengers bunch, and that's where you're going to see the deepest pools. So yeah, I'd be interesting to see what happens with the Guardians of the Galaxy and what aspects those guys really push.
Absolutely. Yeah, the different builds having to have different build mentalities for the different formats, whether it's solo, multiplayer, or the heroic modes, I think is wonderful. It gives this game depth beyond what it already has. We're currently at, is it 13 heroes?
13. Well, it will be 17 at the end of this wave.
So yeah, times 4 aspects. And then, once basic is more fleshed out, you might even have like basic people building decks that are basic, pretty much just a basic aspect deck, or a heavily, you kind of already up to, large numbers of different deck archetypes almost that you can build. So
I won't hold my breath on the basic deck. I think that's more of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but if someone might be able to prove me wrong, because they do have the power-ups, but I almost think that's just kind of to supplement some of those decks that have quite a bit of basic cards in them. Like War Machine, Avengers Mansion, what's his name, Nick Fury, right? So some of the more expensive basic cards, but I would be blown away if people are able to actually make full basic decks that run better than decks that have even 5 or 6 of the aspect card in there to supplement what they're trying to do with the basics. So Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if someone can prove me wrong on that and be like, no, no, trust me, this is one of the top decks you can build with this hero with
I
just basic cards.
Yeah, I hope to be able to build it as a viable build one day and not just for the memes. I also, you mentioned multiplayer. I also think that someone, if not me, one day is going to find a way to push the upper limits of how many players the game can actually feasibly host. Could be fun to get villains with starting HP in the 3 digits, 4 digits. But again, that's probably just for the memes as well.
The dial goes up to what, 209 hit points. The dial the game comes with.
Yeah, I think obviously that might be a sign that they intended or that they assumed that people would push the play limit, but also I think it allows nicely for them to print maybe a character like Galactus, or probably Galactus is probably the best example. But being able to have one where you're pounding away,
hit points.
where you're pounding away on him for over a long period of time, and he's kind of looming there ominously, threatening to blow up the world. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see the Fantastic Four box once that eventually, which it's inevitably going to happen for that it to be just come with just Thanos. Just Galactus rather, and involve the Fantastic Four being able to play the Fantastic Four at once, and them having to beat him up. So I'm going to throw a curveball at you now. Of the 6 decks we've discussed today, how would you rank them in order of effectiveness in the campaign to least effective?
Number 1 would be Cap Aggression, right? I think that takes the cake.
For solo, is this for solo we're talking, yes? Or overall?
Yeah, definitely solo. Because that's how I played them, and at least the build that I made is definitely kind of solo centric. But you could do it two player too. Hey, different player counts use different cards, right? So I would rather use Spider-Man, other than as like an Avengers supplement in a Justice deck. But once you push to 3 players, and then he becomes one of the best cards in the game. So it's so that's always going to vary, on player count. So but yeah, so Captain America Aggression is going to be one. He's a guy who could probably fly through the campaign in under 18 turns if you timed everything right and got the right opening hands.
Because that's a thing now. Like I've seen people talk about speed running the campaign, which I'm here for.
Doc Strange is number 2 aggression. Like I said, I think you're gonna see, in particular after the Wasp deck drops, that gives us even more Avengers allies in aggression. I think that's going to just overrule what leadership's doing, because aggression gives him those minion control aspects that he just doesn't have. That's the only thing his kit really doesn't have is an ability to spread damage around.
Yeah, and having those 1 and 2 isn't surprising, given that you've mentioned that they are probably, that aggression is probably the best aspects for those characters, or in your opinion.
I want to say Black Widow number 3, but I feel like my struggles with Absorbing Man, which it was mainly the Scorpion aspects of constantly getting stunned and just having a couple sloppy starts, regardless of chucking half my hand for the mulligan. I'm going to have to put Hawkeye Protection at number 3, and then and this is where it gets real close, right? But yeah, her ability to really utilize Goliath to an extent that a lot of the other guys aren't going to be able to, and also get like the ping damage, and be able to find those rapid responses if you really need to, by flipping over to Alter Ego mode. Black Widow leadership is going to be number 4. And of course, Captain Marvel or Protection. Like I said, this is really tight, because these were all good decks. I think they just kind of run counter to what people might want to play, or what they on the surface look really good at. And then it's sad that Black Panther Justice is coming at number 6, because it wasn't bad. I would say he was top 3 for fun, but yeah, he unfortunately was getting outshined by some of these other guys in total performance. But Black Panther is one of those guys that he's firing when he's firing, but sometimes he can just lay an egg if stuff doesn't come out right.
Yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't really need a lot. And Justice just really doesn't seem like it adds too great a deal to Black Panther's kit. However, the one thing I do notice and like about being able to play Black Panther Justice is that the key cards for Black Panther are obviously the like Shuri and the two cost upgrades. As far as I'd say key cards, but I'm talking about as in building your board. But also, if you look at Justice and being able to play with your three basic double resources, the Vibraniums, and then potentially two Power of Justice on top of that, is that your Justice cards like Under Surveillance and Counterintelligence all have that two costing as well. So you've got that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got that ability to kind of play out your hand cleanly at times. It's not uncommon to get like a couple of 3 2-cost cards and then 3 double resources and just be able to go, cool, I'll use these 3 to pay for these 3 and attack and end your turn kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Black Panther is probably the easiest guy to sans the power-ups, but he's also, as you're mentioning, the easiest guy to just run a bunch of 2 costs from that aspect and treat everything as if it cost 1. If you have those power-ups in there. So, yeah, if you're using Quake as an ally and you're under surveillance, the counterintelligence, like you mentioned, it's you can have a giant myriad of 2-cost stuff that is just flying right out there on the table, no problem.
Yeah, it's as mentioned. I'm not surprised that Black Panther kind of sits at the bottom of that list, even if just because Justice adds the least and it's therefore not really bringing as much to the table. Even if, I mean, the Black Panther game plan is pretty strong, but the adding the least to it basically, so it's still kind of essentially vulnerable to the same strengths and weaknesses. And I can also see it being, I think of the list so far, it's probably the one that I'd be least enthusiastic about really building and tweaking, just because it's Black Panther's game plan and then vanilla thwarting things on top of it.
Yeah,
Much.
well, and some of that stuff does kind of get in the way because even though you are dropping those 2 drops and you are getting them out there, at the end of the day, if you have the option to build his board or to throw out a counterintelligence, I'm putting out the Panther Claws, the tactical genius. It's so it's kind of demanding that you get those out there, or even the it's not ancestral knowledge. That's the one where you dig the Golden City, right? So you get the Golden City. Like those are all the cards that you're going to be getting out there and playing and making sure that you got that stuff going. So it's sometimes it is hard to set that board up with the aspect. So yeah, I used it mostly as a damage supplement just to keep their side of the board under control, and it worked out. But Justice needs something a little bit more something, and that's just to touch on the Hulk, which I didn't finish yet. And part of the reason why is because the Hulk loves physical symbols, and there is almost no physical symbols in Justice right now. I mean, it is like barren. And the hilarious thing is, I don't know if we'll see any physical symbols, or at least many, in this next wave, because I don't see Scarlet Witch as a deck that would be producing a bunch of physical symbols, and the stuff that she would want, the flavor of cards that she would like, and not having a bunch of physical symbols either. So it's kind of he is more than anybody other character. He really demands that type, and that's just really lacking on Justice. So that's been my biggest hang up right now is how to make that work in both a flavorful way and still get things like Hulk Smash to consistently fire off without having to have his triple resources in hand already.
Hulk's in a rough place at the moment, just because as you said, that outside of aggression, your physical resources tend to be a bit less common, and he really is relying on those, which makes sense flavorfully. But and just having Hulk Injustice, for instance, is difficult because even if you're slowing the game down to try and allow him to grind down his game plan a bit better, it's going back to banner, you're only getting 5 cards and you've got 4 cards. You can't really look to plan long term so much with Hulk because of that. The fact that you're only getting either 4 or 5 cards and you're getting a fresh 4 cards every turn if you're in hero mode. So yeah, that's the first 6 decks of the. Do we have a nickname for this list?
I guess the neglected list. Because some of these are real good, right? But they're neglected,
Underrepresented, yeah,
or underappreciated, but yeah, underrepresented is probably the best. That's probably the best title, because some of them definitely makes sense that they're not played that much, but others, it's more mind-boggling why more people wouldn't have caught on to the drop kick for aggression, and how that just puts cap aggression past cap protection.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to people getting back to us with different feedback. Saying that they were on these decks from day one, and that like they weren't sleeping on them. So definitely, if you're listening, I'd love to hear from you as to how many seconds into the cards reveal you picked up on these deck archetypes. So just so everyone can kind of play along at home, I'm going to read out the decks we'll be covering next time around with this, which maybe in anywhere from a week to 3 weeks' time. We'll be covering the builds we've discussed today. I'll be linking down to some of Earth Dragon's builds in the description, also maybe a couple of mine for the different ones. But for next time around, if you do want to try and build them ahead of the next episode, the second half of the list is Hulk Justice, Iron Man Leadership, Ms. Marvel Injustice, She-Hulk with Protection, Spider-Man with Aggression, Spider-Woman using the Justice and Leadership combination, and Thor in Leadership. Did you have any quick tips for people looking to build with those decks in advance of the next episode?
Yeah, I think with the Hulk, you're gonna have to look to basic. You're gonna have to start looking in there a little bit deeper. That's one where you could supplement highly. Once those power ups come from that side, but enhance physique. And just trying to really look through, like Mockingbird's a good one. Lockjaw is also a quintessential Hulk card. If you built a Hulk deck and it does not have Lockjaw in it, you did it wrong.
Yeah, he's the 16th card in Hulk's hero kit, which is funny because you've got the there's that iconic scene from the Hulk not sitcom, but with the TV show with Lou Ferrigno of him walking away sadly with the backpack. It's funny to like yeah. Lockjaw just floating after him, and things being slightly less sad. But
so yeah, Iron Man Leadership. You got a lot of options there. So I think I'll just move on. Ms. Marvel Justice. It's all about popping those cards back into your hand and knowing which ones to get that trigger off of. Yeah, she should be able to get that board locked down pretty easily. And things, I think Stealth Strike is probably the big one to look at there, because you can bump it up to 6 damage with her pretty easily, and so you get that 2x to thwart if you take somebody out. She-Hulk Protection, try to sneak Avengers in there. That's what I'm going to be doing. It's funny. Like I mentioned that War Machine thing, right? To where he ends up with because I build him in a series of 4, and he ends up with most of the protection decks. I think it's going to happen again there, because She-Hulk's major drawback is if she gets exhausted or stunned or something, then that usually flounders her turn. So if you can get a few Avengers, including Hellcat, in there, so using War Machine and Brother Voodoo, getting some Avengers or Earth's Mightiest Heroes to help her out with that situation is probably clutch.
You mentioned earlier
Spider-Man,
you mentioned earlier the flavor aspect of having War Machine and a Captain Marvel protection deck, given that they were in a relationship together. Funnily
yeah,
enough, the my understanding is that James Rhodes as War Machine dies at the start of Civil War II, and in that same explosion, She-Hulk also gets very, very badly injured as well, and Captain Marvel is just like distraught as hell because she's lost a couple of people that she really, really loves. So there's a bit of secondhand flavorfulness to that as well, having War Machine in with She-Hulk protection too.
yeah, no, it's he's one of my favorite guys, anyways. A lot of people don't know that he was actually Iron Man during the Secret Wars. First Secret Wars, Spidey got his black costume. Because they didn't really announce it. I can't remember when they revealed that he was running around as Iron Man, but that's when Tony Stark was having alcohol problems. So he's been a character running around in Marvel for a long time, and then finally got his due in the '90s when he got his own unique armor and character. But yeah, I'm glad he works. I'm glad he's honestly one of the strongest Avengers allies overall, and works in the deck. Spider-Man aggression, toe to toe. Don't sit on it because Spider-Man gets bonuses for getting attacked. So I think working toe to toe in the build, or at least trying to, would be a good move. And Justice leadership. Usually Spider-Woman just likes to dink and dunk. The cheaper the cards you can do, the better. Also, a 5-cost Spider-Man ally can cost 2 effective resources. I'll let you figure that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. And Thor leadership, that might actually be he's another one that might be his best aspect. He doesn't get the get over here synergies, but the whole fact that it's chock full of some of its most vital cards are energy symbols, should really help him out there. And even the one that's not an energy symbol, but it's got his picture on it. I mean, we've already talked about what was going on with Black Widow, so that's probably another card I'd slip in there originally for thematic purposes, but I think it will really work, even though it doesn't have that energy symbol. So this list will probably, other than the Captain America and Doc Strange, 1-2 punch combo of just being off the chain with aggression up there. I think overall this second half will probably perform better than the first half overall.
That's actually just something that I've considered now, that maybe part of Captain America aggression and Doctor Strange aggression being underrepresented might be that people are just the deck's strengths and builds are pretty obvious, and they're kind of almost just bored of it, I guess, or just they just don't see it as being a fun play because of how the build is obvious, or they just don't see them as being fun or exciting aspects to work with in those characters.
I think it's how that the numbers, the spreadsheet I'm going off of, I think it's how those numbers work too, is that sometimes if you're struggling more, you end up playing 5 games, right? So I end up plugging in more games for Black Widow leadership than any of the other ones, just because I chalked up more losses. So if Captain America, you're blazing through it, the numbers match what I was saying. I'm looking at it right now, and he's at 85.4% win percentage in solo with aggression. So they're like, yeah, fair. That's pretty dang good. When we were talking about those dual advances that go off, like, I mean, that's almost chalked up to how many just natural losses you can get to at that point, right? I think once you start pushing towards 90%, that's what you're dealing with, is just those situational losses. So he's about there. Once he got those drop kicks, I think that was it. He was just going to be the top dog there.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's we've done a really, really good job of covering those first few decks. And I'm looking forward to being able to build based on the second half of that list. Just so everyone, just before everyone kind of tries to jump us, as Earth Dragon has just pointed out, these aren't definitively like terrible decks, or these aren't um, decks that nobody's thought of. These are underrepresented across a number of statistic outlets, including Board Game Geek. So, but if you have been on these decks early, feel free to reach out to us either via the comments in the YouTube version of this podcast, or to 616mcpodcast@gmail.com. Or while you're there, even feel free to fire us through some of your builds for the second half of the list for us to have a bit of a look at. Just before you sign off, Earth Dragon, is there anywhere else people can find you or hear you, or is there anything you'd like to plug?
No, I mean you'll see me on the Discord and stuff, and you know, I do live by my namesake. You know, I'm a little ferocious sometimes, but it's all in good natured fun. So you know, don't take anything too seriously, myself, yourself included, and but you know, and definitely go by Board Game Geek, check out that spreadsheet, you know, find it in the general forums, and start plugging your games in. It does have entries for rookie and heroic games. I advise to just stick to the standard and expert entries, because if you start putting in those heroic entries, it kind of mucks up the numbers for those, because some guys can't ever play heroic. They're just never going to be able to get to it. And so when you look at the averages, it averages everything together, unfortunately. So they stick to standard and expert mode only. But it's a fun spreadsheet to peruse. And thanks again, Scotty. I appreciate you bringing me on and being able to talk about this. And I look forward to talking to you in another 2-3 weeks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Fantastic discussion today. I will try and hunt down that Board Game Geek spreadsheet and hopefully put that down in the episode link below. Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm also looking forward to doing this again in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, should be good. Like I said, I'm actually looking forward to this second half more than the first half, just because I kind of knew what to expect from at least half of these.
There we have it. That wraps up part 2 of episode 1. Thank you very much for tuning in. We intend to return with the second half of the neglected list in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, and look forward to having you join us then. As I mentioned, in the meantime, if you do wish to submit some of your decks for part 2 of the list, please send them to 616mcpodcast@gmail.com, along with any other feedback you might have about the episode so far. Thank you very much. Bye.